So now to just finish up our discussion on nitrogenous waste, we'll entitle this next flowchart Nitrogenous Waste, Roman numeral 2 here. And remember, as we're going through this, be sure to take a look at figure 44.7 for a visual reference of everything we're talking about. So in the last video, we actually finished off by saying that ammonia is this highly toxic substance. If you're an aquatic organism, that's nice, right? You get to just easily diffuse ammonia out from within the internal environment to the external water environment because you have this unlimited external water supply. Diffusion, very little metabolic energy. What if you're not living in water? What if you're a terrestrial organism? You must convert it, we left off, to two different forms. Depends on which organism you are. Either urea or uric acid. And that's what we'll talk about in the nitrogenous waste 2 video here. So let's say you convert ammonia into urea. Urea is going to be a really important metabolic product that's going to be produced by a couple of different organisms or classes of organisms, specifically mammals, so that covers us, right, as humans. We always want to know where do we fit in the picture. Mammals, amphibians will do this, and even some fish will have to use this urea component. It's usually going to be freshwater fish in this situation. So we're produced by mammals, amphibians, and fish. Okay, the focus here is now, what is this urea? What really is it? And first of all, I just want to really make sure we understand that this is going to be literally the primary nitrogenous waste, the main nitrogenous waste of us as humans, of us as terrestrial mammals on Earth here. So primary nitrogenous waste of humans. And this is going to be, sort of in contrast to the fact that we have ammonia, right? Ammonia is definitely a toxic nitrogenous waste that needs to be excreted, but we can't directly excrete it. We have to convert it and indirectly excrete ammonia in this urea form. That's why it's the primary nitrogenous waste of humans. How do we have urea? Where does it come from? What are the metabolic, roots of this? It is actually going to be produced by a very complex cycle known as the urea cycle. The urea cycle is going to occur within the liver of humans. It's going to combine ammonia with carbon dioxide, a couple of really complex biochemical conversions and reactions, none of which you need to worry about, okay? Just understand that the urea cycle is what's going to take ammonia and convert it into a different form known as urea, the soluble form that's going to be the primary nitrogenous waste. So there are going to be some reasons for this, and I like to think of those reasons as advantages of doing this urea cycle, ammonia to urea conversion. Well, first of all, I told you ammonia, highly toxic, right? You can't store it because it's so toxic. You have to immediately get rid of it, or you have to immediately convert it into something like urea. The thing is, with urea, the reason why we convert it to this form is because urea actually has a very low toxicity. It is not going to be super toxic. Still has to be gotten rid of, don't get me wrong, but it's not as toxic within the internal human environment as ammonia. So that's obviously an advantage. And also another advantage is that it is also very much soluble in H2O. That means we can easily dissolve it in that osmoregulatory component of H2O content versus dissolved substances. And this all coincides to the fact that this can be excreted, in other words, right? Excretion is about collecting fluid and excreting fluid. Excreting fluid is going to involve excreting nitrogenous waste, specifically in this urea form, because it's less toxic, it's soluble in H2O, and therefore we get this capability of excreting it. The thing is, even though there are these advantages, one major disadvantage actually is simply the fact that this requires a decent amount of energy. It requires energy to make. It's just a metabolic need. It needs ATP. It's not going to be an easy process like diffusion, right out through the gills or right out through the body surfaces. Instead, it actually requires some energy, but nonetheless, its pros definitely outweighs its cons of just storing ammonia in a very toxic form. Now we're guided to this less toxic form, easily soluble and easily excretable, if that's a word. So that's us, urea, mammals, amphibians, and fish. Uric acid is the other conversion possibility, right? I said you can convert ammonia into urea or uric acid. Uric acid is going to be mainly produced by, this is produced by birds, and you will really understand this in just a second. Why? Birds, reptiles, insects, and land snails. I'm not even going to write the land snails part. So birds, reptiles, and insects. Very common organisms that we encounter on our day-to-day lives for the most part, right? Uric acid is even more complex than urea. The goal to actually get to it from ammonia. It's a 15-step process, and guess what? You don't need to know a single step. You just need to know that ammonia is converted to uric acid through this 15-step process. It also occurs within these organisms' liver and requires lots of energy. It requires lots of energy, okay? But there's going to be a payoff of this. First of all, not only does it have a low toxicity, it's actually considered non-toxic. After these 15 steps, it's a completely non-toxic, it's almost 99%, I should say, non-toxic substance now that was formerly very toxic in the form of ammonia. Now uric acid, it's non-toxic now. Another interesting thing is uric acid is actually insoluble. That means it cannot dissolve in H2O. This is something that's weird because we've been talking about excretion, we're talking about dissolving in H2O so that we can excrete it out very easily. If it's insoluble in H2O, what happens? How do these organisms excrete it? Uric acid, interestingly enough, and this is where you might recognize something very familiar to you, uric acid is secreted, and this is on purpose, it's secreted without much H2O loss. Because again, if you're excreting urea, you're dissolving it in H2O, therefore you are releasing H2O and you're excreting it out. If you are not dissolving uric acid in water, that means you're keeping H2O in and you're not losing that H2O through that excretion process. So what happens? How is it actually excreted? Uric acid is actually excreted as a semi-solid, that's the technical term here, believe it or not, a semi-solid paste. And it's actually going to be combined with the feces. The feces is what's eliminated, and then the nitrogenous waste, like uric acid, will be excreted. And what is this? This is going to essentially be bird poop. No more or no less. This is exactly that bird poop you see on your car. Why is it so pasty? Why is it that semi-solid looking thing? Why is it somewhat dissolvable or whatever it may be? The idea is this is a uric acid based compound that has been excreted by birds, right? Birds, reptiles, or insects. So that covers our look at urea and uric acid. In the next flowchart, what we'll be doing now is looking specifically at human excretion within the human excretory system.